attention. Okay. And just welcome you. And actually, for anybody who I may not know here or may not know me, I'm Stacy Bershad, and I'm a member of the Women's Chavurah Committee. And we are so thrilled tonight to welcome Mitch Gruber, who is both a city council member and chief programs officer for Foodlink. And let's have a little snippet here. I don't know if you would like me to read this or if Mitch, you would like to talk about Foodlink, but
yeah,
I learned a lot when I was looking.
I'm more than happy to skip any formal introductions and to launch right in, if that's okay with everybody else.
Yeah, sure. And actually, we were able to actually run the video. We practiced before.
Oh, do you want to run the video to start?
I'm gonna try. Yes,
go right ahead. Yep.
I'm gonna try. And the one thing I did want to say, we're so happy that you're here tonight talking with us, that there will be a donation made to Foodlink.
Thanks, that's very kind of you. Appreciate it.
Okay, we're gonna try to make this thing work. Hold on a second. Oh my gosh. Hold on. I have to minimize everything. I had the video. Hang on.
It's no problem for me if you want to share the video afterwards, and
Okay.
I'm a pretty good explainer of what Foodlink does at this point. I'm celebrating my Foodlink bar mitzvah this year. It's been 13 years, so if I haven't figured it out by now, I probably never will.
Okay, why don't we share it afterwards?
Okay, sounds good.
Figure out where it went to on my screen.
And I've been hearing some feedback, so I would ask everybody, if you don't mind. I think best practice for this stuff is if you can put yourself on mute, that's great. And then if you have any questions, I can see everybody's square, so you can just raise your hand or unmute yourself. But I think that's best for not hearing any feedback. So let me start. I get asked to speak very often to different groups about Foodlink and what we do. So I'm going to start by just giving you a 30,000-foot overview of who we are as an organization and what we do. I will at times try to link it to the Jewish tradition. I'll tell you up front, the idea of food banking is very much a biblical idea. So I can talk about that briefly. And then I really want to just open it up and have some dialogue with folks. I have a hard stop at 8 o'clock, but I'm happy to be with you all until then and be able to answer any questions that people may have. So Foodlink is what's called the regional food bank. And there's a lot of nomenclature that gets thrown around. People talk about food banks synonymously with food pantries or with soup kitchens, but they're very different. A food bank is, think of us as a wholesale network, right? So we actually don't do any direct service in Foodlink. We bring in food from all over the place and we give it out to the very food pantries, soup kitchens, food cupboards, food shelves, all the, for lack of a better word, we'll call them retail spots. So examples of that would be the Brighton food cupboard, right? Run through the Jewish Family Services. That's a food cupboard that gets their food from Foodlink. Another example would be, the Penfield food shelf. In the city of Rochester, there are a ton of church-based ecumenical food pantries. And so all told, Foodlink as a network has hundreds, close to 500 total partners. We are a membership-based organization and our food goes out to those various sites. So let me tell you where we get our food from. We get our food from anywhere that has a surplus and for whatever reason is not selling that through retail channels. So here's some examples. let's say, we are blessed in Rochester to be in a really rich agricultural area, right? So if you look around, there's a reason why Ledestri, one of the biggest tomato sauce and Italian foods products, is headquartered here. There's a reason why Barilla, the biggest pasta manufacturer in the world, has one North American outpost, and it's in Avon, New York. There's a reason why Kraft and Bonduelle and some of the biggest manufacturers of food are in our region. And when they have product that is not fit for their channels, but is perfectly safe for human consumption, it goes to us in total, right? Here's an example. Let's say Mott's. That's another one I didn't talk about. Mott's is headquartered in Wayne County, because that's the third biggest apple producing county in the entire nation. Let's say Mott's puts too much cinnamon in their applesauce. Or let's say Mott's they get a batch of apples that have a flavor that just don't meet their normal criteria. They don't want to make 100 calls or 200 calls to every food pantry and say, come pick up a case. They want to send a truckload to one spot. So that's really where food banks form from. Let's say I talked about Barilla. Every week we get a shipment of Barilla, and the only reason why Barilla is sending it to us is because someone in their warehouse must have dropped the pallet and all the boxes are crushed. But the pasta inside is perfectly fine, right? So that product is going to come to us, and our job is to then get it out to our network. Wegmans, huge retail partner. Anything Wegmans decides they can't sell or they won't sell, it's near a sell-by date. It could just be that it's an unpopular item. It could be that someone was walking down the aisle and they knocked a can of tuna off the shelf and then it got a little dent. All that product comes back to Foodlink. And so we have a really rigorous sorting mechanism. And I know Stacy at one point asked me to talk about volunteer opportunities. We have some tailored volunteer opportunities, but the single biggest one where we always have volunteers is helping us sort through this food. We need to make sure that every piece of food that comes through our facility gets looked at not once, but twice. At the end of the day, no matter how poor someone is, no matter how hungry someone is, no one should get food that is tainted. No one should get food that is unsafe. No one should get food that is unclean. So we have volunteers who are every day helping us with that quality control process. And like I said before, this is a biblical concept, right? Can anyone want to come off mute and tell me the biblical, the Old Testament story that is the origin of food banking? Anyone? Yeah, I see Lester is the name on your screen, but I don't think you're Lester. Go ahead. Uh-oh, I lost you. Okay, well, technology again. I see someone else came off of mute. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Martha.
Okay, well, I have two things I'm thinking. One is leaving the corner of your field so that, other people, the less fortunate can come and, what do you call it? I'm not thinking of the word, not scavenge, but, be able to partake. And the other is every 7 years doesn't really pertain to that.
No, but those are both great references. That's Shemitah and that's Shemitah and the Jubilee are the things you're talking about, which is exactly right. And those are certainly biblical roots of this.
Is that what gleaning? Is that gleaning?
Yeah, that's gleaning.
Is that the word? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But there's an even more direct biblical story. If anyone else has any thoughts, anyone? So we have our first guest came back, but is now frozen again. Uh-oh. Stupid technology. Can't blame anyone for that. So here's the story. Jacob and Joseph is who I mean. So when Joseph goes down to Egypt, and he has this dream about the 7 fat cows and the 7 hungry cows, and then he has another dream that shows, again, it shows plenty and it shows famine. Joseph goes and ends up connecting with Pharaoh and creates what is really the world's first recorded food bank, right? They store all the food that they have in excess, so that in those 7 years of abundance, they store all this food so that in the 7 years of famine, they have food to be able to give out to folks. And that is very much the biblical roots of what food banking is. Food banks really pop up in the United States in the 1970s, is really the origin of food banks. And part of it too, by the way, is stuff that's going on in the US government. Can anyone think of anything that was happening in the late 1970s? Particular, well, this is an impossible question for you all to answer. I'll just tell you. But you all probably remember President Carter and the government cheese, right? There was this cheese stored in caves all over the place because there was this surplus. So it's food banks sort of pop up around the same time as a way to really try to help bring some organization to the emergency food network. There have been food pantries and soup kitchens for much longer than the 1970s, right? I mean, we know this from looking at bread lines from the Great Depression. But what's different is there begins to be a little bit of a sophistication to the organization of how this stuff works, and that's really where food banks grew out of. And I want to give you a sense of numbers now, and these are frankly kind of scary numbers, but I have to share them with you anyways. As I told you all, Foodlink bar mitzvah this year. So if anyone wants to send me a high check, you can make it out to Foodlink. You can send it right there. Wish me a happy bar mitzvah. I'm just joking. But when I started 13 years ago, actually almost 14 years ago now, because it was 2008, we are just starting the recession of 2008. And at that point, Foodlink was distributing about 8 million pounds of food a year. That was kind of our number, our peak, 8 million pounds of food a year. By the time the impact of the recession really hit, we were up to serving almost double that. We were at about 15 million pounds a year by 2011. And that's just because as the economy suffers, one of the first places that people go is to the food pantry, right? If you think about it, there isn't a sophisticated charitable network for a lot of things, right? There's not a sophisticated charitable network to help you pay to fill up your car with gas. There's not a sophisticated charitable network to help you pay for your medicines or pharmaceuticals. There's not a sophisticated charitable network to help you pay your medical bills or utility bills or your rent. But there is for food, a very sophisticated one. If you go to our website right now and go to the top right corner of our website, you can click a button that says Find Food, and you can find literally hundreds of food pantries that will serve anybody who walks in a box of food. So when economic struggle is here, one of the first places to really feel the pinch of that is the emergency food network. And that was true in 2008. Unfortunately, I saw some significant growth from 2008 to just a few years later. And then after 2008, I think the really scary thing is that it never came back down. It plateaued, right? So I said we were at 8 million pounds in 2008. By 2011, we were at 15 million pounds. It never went below 15 million pounds again. And we were plateauing between 15 and 18 million pounds a year, but no substantial growth. And then all of a sudden COVID hit. And when COVID hit, we went from a peak in 18 million pound a year food bank to last year, we distributed 26 million pounds of food out of our doors. Just absolutely tremendous. And that doesn't even begin to talk about all the other things that we do as an organization, which I'll get to later. But, the reason I share those numbers, other than I just think they're kind of an interesting barometer of things, is, again, to describe the fact that there isn't necessarily a particular I don't want people to walk away from this thinking that we have a particular hunger crisis in the United States or in Rochester. We really don't. In fact, I have been to all sorts of parts of the world where there really is a hunger crisis. There is a shortage of food. People are waiting in long lines because there is no food available. That's not what we have here. If we were to go to Strong Hospital or RGH and we were to say to them, how many people died of starvation here in the last year? What do you think the answer would be? 0. No one's died of starvation in Rochester. I mean, at least I really don't think they have in the last very many years. What we have is a crisis, not of hunger, but a crisis of poverty. We live in a time and a place where we are fortunate, and I'm making assumptions about the people on the call here, so pardon me, but I am making these assumptions, where any of us have a car, any of us have some disposable income, and we have a certain store called Wegmans that are mostly open 24 hours a day and carry literally everything. I mean, everything. What can you not get at Wegmans? So at the end of the day, I think it's awfully misleading to be thinking about us having a problem with hunger. Anybody who has resources, anybody who has money, anybody who has the means, who lives in Rochester can get to the store and can buy whatever they want any time of day. But the very sad truth is that we have far too many people who don't have the means, who don't have the resources. We have a true tale of two cities. And, food is such an interesting way of examining it. I grew up, some of you might know my family, small Jewish community. I'm guessing some of you do. So I grew up in Brighton. Both my mom and my dad lived in Brighton. Both my grandparents lived in Brighton. And my mother and my 2 grandmothers still do, as a matter of fact. I'm very lucky. I have 2 bubbies still. At my old age of 36, I have 2 bubbies living in Rochester still. And right where they live, and right where I would imagine a lot of your congregants live, what do we have? We have the flagship Wegmans. We have the only Trader Joe's in the whole region. And in very short period of time, we're going to have Whole Foods, all within within less than a square mile of each other. It is, it's remarkable how much food is in that one neck of the woods. I could throw a baseball standing in the middle of the road to all 3 of them. I currently live very far from where I grew up. I live in everyone know where the Susan B. Anthony house is? I live across the street, literally. The Susan B. Anthony house is right there, right across the street from me. There's not a grocery store within 2.5 miles of my house. The vast majority of my neighbors don't have cars. And I would say, and I this is anecdotal, but I think it's as valid as anything else, that even the closest store to me is the Tops on West Avenue, if folks can picture that. If you were to go to the Tops on West Avenue, and you were to go to the Tops on South Clinton in Loman's Plaza, which is the grocery store that I shopped at most when I was a kid, you're not in the same store. You're in 2 very, very different stores. So, people talk about the food, the crisis of food in our community as though it's really complicated. People use all sorts of words and jargon and catchphrases like food desert and food insecurity and things of that nature. And I don't begrudge anyone for using those terms, but I tend to like to really simplify things. And we live in a time and place where if you have money and you live near where there's money, every single grocery store wants to be at your beck and call. And if you can get there, there's nothing you can't buy. But if you live in a poor part of our community, it is a real struggle to get to the grocery store. So where do people end up getting their food from? From convenience stores, from mini markets, from dollar stores. So I told you before that if you go to Strong or RGH and ask how many people died of starvation, you're probably going to get the answer of 0. But if you went to Strong or RGH and you said, how many people have died are suffering from diet-related illnesses, almost incalculable. Diabetes, hypertension, heart disease, all sorts of diet-related illnesses, preventable diet-related illnesses are plaguing this community and frankly the entire country. And it's particularly the poorer you are, the more likely you are to have these diet-related illnesses. So Foodlink's charge is to address just that. And we do it in a multitude of ways. So let me give you a couple of key snapshots, and then I'm going to open it up to some questions. So I talked before about the core work that we do, which is food banking, right? That's the story of, I see our first speaker is back on. She's probably too scared to take herself off of mute. So I'm not going to ask you to do it, but I'm guessing you were gonna tell us about the story of Joseph in Egypt.
Yeah.
And you weren't. Okay. Well, food banking is that story, right? And that's what we do in droves. When the pandemic hit, we were able to serve hundreds of thousands of individuals. Foodlink covers a 10-county service area, so we have urban, rural, and suburban. And we were able to provide food to pretty much everyone in this community who needed it and who wanted it. That is the core function of what we do. And we do it, as I said, through a network of agencies. Anyone can go to our website. You can go to foodlinkny.org. You can see all the different sites that we serve. You can call 211 at any time. You can ask folks for where to get food. That's the core of what we do. The second element of what we do, we also operate a commercial kitchen. Our kitchen is in the same building as our warehouse at the corner of Mount Read and Driving Park. And we produce close to 10,000 meals a day in this community for school-age children. And our goal really is to raise the bar on institutional food service. Unfortunately, institutional food service is so often a race to the bottom. It is a question of who can produce the most food for cheapest. And what we try to do is make sure that we're producing quality food for kids from all over this community. So those 10,000 meals a day go to, we vend to some schools, specifically charter schools. We vend to all sorts of after-school programs. So every YMCA in town is going to get food from us. All the settlement houses get their food from us. We provide meals to every city rec center. So kids who go after school, the rec centers can get food. And we're providing fresh, scratch-made food Monday through Friday, about 10,000 meals a day. That's a huge part of what we do. We also operate the kind of third piece, other than food banking kitchen, is just general health-based programming. So we have the curbside market, which is a mobile farmers market that goes all around this community, selling people fresh fruits, vegetables, eggs, and otherwise. It's basically what the hucksters and peddlers used to do back in the day, right? So I also happened to, before I decided to get into politics, I was actually working at Foodlink and in the academy, and I did a PhD in history from the University of Rochester, and I wrote quite a bit about hucksters and peddlers and pushcart operators. And this was what historians at the time called ethnic welfare, right? This is before credit cards. This is before major social safety nets funded by the federal government. If you were a Jewish immigrant on Joseph Avenue in the second wave of immigration, you were here in the early 20th century, and you spoke Yiddish, and you didn't have any money, and the holidays were coming, and you needed some schmaltz, where were you going to go? You were going to the corner grocery, and how are you going to pay for it? You were going to ask for credit, and how are you going to get it? It was going to get delivered to you. I mean, there's all these elements of how the food system, the stores, the retail environment used to work more for people. Now it's all quite the opposite. The power dynamics have flipped considerably. Well, our curbside market tries to go back to the old school. We take fresh fruits, vegetables, and eggs. We go directly to where people are, up and down streets like Joseph Avenue, and we set up little markets there. and we accept food stamp benefits, which are now called SNAP benefits, and we double them. We give a free 100% incentive to anyone utilizing SNAP benefits. We just became the first mobile market in the entire nation to accept WIC benefits, which is another federal entitlement program specifically for mothers of young children. We also run a number of cooking classes and different cooking and nutrition education curricula. Because I'll tell you, one of the stupidest things that we ever did as a society was take home economics out of school. Kids do not learn how to cook anymore. We've lost generations of cooks. And there was no home ec when I was in school. I graduated Brighton High School in 03, maybe. Went to Hillel School K through 8, Brighton High School in 03. I never once in my 18 years, or I guess 13 years of education, was taught how to cook. Never. And I believe that is the case for most kids these days. Certainly in the Rochester City School District, there's no home economics. So we run cooking classes almost every day. We're at the public market Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, cooking up something fresh, teaching people how to shop, cook, and eat healthy on a budget. We're going to school, we're going to after school programming, and we're trying to link that with the curbside market so that we're not just telling people, hey, it's important to eat more broccoli. We're also trying to teach people how to make broccoli taste good. And then the final thing I'll talk about is that we really know that there's no better way to address the systemic issues in front of us than through economic development, right? At the end of the day, this is an economic issue. This is not, we do not produce too little food in Rochester or in the United States of America. If we captured every ounce of food we threw away as a nation, we could feed everyone many times over. So what we try to do is make sure that we give people access to jobs. And we started the first culinary apprenticeship program. It's a formal New York State apprenticeship, 12 months, teaching people not just how to cook, but how to become professionals in the field, and helping people who were otherwise oftentimes trapped in the cycle of poverty, trapped in the emergency food network, and giving them an opportunity to actually be able to go develop some economic independence. And so everything that we do is always, to me, I think the power of Foodlink, the reason why I have been there for 13 years, the reason why I'll probably celebrate my second bar mitzvah there in 13 years, is because at the end of the day, I really believe that social service organizations have to understand that there is always a continuum. Nothing is ever a simple problem. We're never going to solve hunger by feeding it. We're never going to solve hunger by feeding it. There's way bigger, deeper systemic issues. You solve hunger by feeding it, it just comes back the next day. But that doesn't mean you don't feed it. You absolutely do. You have to. We don't want anyone in this community to go to bed hungry on any given night. No questions asked. And we're going to do everything we can to make sure that's not the case. But if you're going to bed hungry, you can be rest assured there's other things going on in your life besides just the need for food. So everything we do is about trying to bake and wrap around services. It's about trying to build a bridge to move out of the emergency food network. I'm happy to answer any questions about it. I'll also just say last thing is that everything that I just talked about has volunteer opportunities. We have volunteer opportunities for our nutrition education programming. I made my mother for a number of years volunteer for us. So I can tell you that Jewish mothers like volunteering for this program. Our curbside market has volunteers. We always have people going out with our drivers, doing customer service, helping people shop for what it is they want. As I said before, sorting food is always a huge part of what we do. We have a farm. I didn't talk about that, but we actually operate a farm in the northwest of Rochester that is predominantly for the refugee community in Rochester to be able to, mostly Nepali refugees, to be able to have some space to grow the things that they're accustomed to eating back at home. And there's always volunteer opportunities there. I will tell you that sadly, all of our volunteer opportunities, every one that I just talked about, is absolutely different now than it used to because of COVID. And we have a harder time actually. We have more volunteers who want to do stuff than we necessarily have people or slots to be able to do things, because we want to make sure that we're keeping everybody safe. I do suspect that that's going to be changing fairly soon. It seems, knock on wood, it seems like we are moving into a new moment here, and I think that we're going to be able to expand our volunteer opportunities, maybe by making people flash their vaccine card and making sure that everybody stays masked. But I want you to know that if you were to sign up for volunteer opportunities today on our website, they might be a little bit more limited than we want them to be. But that's not here for good. That's going to roll back pretty soon, I believe. I saw someone put in the chat about Devorah Coco. Not only did Devorah used to bring a whole bunch of volunteers, and not only is Devorah still a wonderful financial supporter of Foodlink, but the entire Coco family, Foodlink owes so much of where we are today to the Coco family. We, when I first started working at Foodlink 13 years ago, our building was 936 Exchange Street, which was the old Coco paper company. And when the Coco brothers decided to sell the company, or I don't know if it was sell or get out of business, I'm not sure exactly what it was, they donated the building to Foodlink free of charge. And that donated building really allowed us to not have to focus on fundraising and things of that nature for just to survive. And we were able to be a little bit more strategic and thoughtful, and it really helped us become the organization that we are today. And Mort Coco was one of the biggest champions for Foodlink I could possibly think of. He was on our board forever. Mort was like a mentor to me. I was so sad about him passing last year. But the Coco family has been incredible partners of ours, and Devorah, so consistent, and Devorah was a substitute teacher of mine when I was at Hillel School, so I've known her my whole life. And yeah, the Jewish community has been very good to Foodlink, 100%. And I do sometimes wish, if I were to be honest, that we had more Jewish frontline organizations in Rochester. If you look at our network of partners, and that's my core job at Foodlink, is to really oversee our network of partners. We have hundreds of partners. The vast majority of them are ecumenical, faith-based Christian. We really only have one totally Jewish organization working with us, and that's the Brighton Food Cupboard. And I do wish that was a little bit different, but I know that the Jewish community steps up in a lot of different ways. I know that, for example, your congregation, I believe, has partnerships with various groups who are doing food distribution. So, everyone's going to contribute in their own way, but that would be one wish of mine, is that the Jewish community would be a little bit more on the front line sometimes for some things. Anyways, that was quite a tangent from someone's message about Devorah, but I'm like a wind-up toy. If you start me on something, I won't stop until I run out of breath. So anyways, anyone have any questions that you want to ask? I have some time, still happy to answer anything you have.
Mitch, when I was a kid, I used to deliver surplus food. My mother used to take me down to Baden Street Settlement, and we'd pick up these boxes of the most horrible food. This had to be probably 1960 to maybe 64-ish, and it was big vats of government issue peanut butter and Velveeta cheese and white bread, and even as a kid I knew it was not stuff that people really should be eating, but that's what we had to give. And my mother had a list of families, and we used to deliver all this to their homes. And then with food stamps, all of that improved, and now with SNAP and with all the various outlets for people. I volunteer at the Pittsburgh Food Cupboard. It's an amazing place.
Yeah, and I thank you for the comment. That's really interesting. I'd love to hear more about it at some point. All this stuff worked a lot differently 40, 50 years ago. If it was really the 1960s, that's before. So Foodlink's technical birth was 1978, and we were actually Tom Ferraro, who is the founder of Foodlink and my personal mentor, and one of Mort Coco's best friends. Tom started Foodlink while he was an employee of Action for a Better Community. And so ABC housed Foodlink for about 4 years. And then in 1982, we went off on our own. So anything that happened before that is kind of like a black hole for me. Be curious to pick your brain about it at some point. But One thing I can say is that even the federal government has gotten a lot better about improving the quality of the product. There's still things I wish they could do a little bit better in terms of like branding. We do get a lot of. I'll just give you an example. We, over the holidays, Thanksgiving and Christmas, we got a lot of mashed potatoes from the federal government. Good mashed potatoes, instant mashed potatoes, but for some reason they called them on the box they were called like dehydrated potato flakes. It's no reason to do that. It turns everybody off. However, I'll tell you one thing that's really great is the feds have recently started to give all the food banks a great amount of shelf stable milk, like very ultra pasteurized milk. Which, back in the day when you were giving out food, it was probably powdered milk. And powdered milk, I think, has a whole lot of stigma associated with it. The shelf-stable milk, you really would not be able to tell the difference of what it is, even the packaging. So there's been consistent improvements. But also, let's recognize that we occupy a food system that is very, very broken. A food system that that necessarily, based on the way that it's crafted, produces more crap than quality food. And I'm going to give you that told you I'm a wind up to. I'm going to give you a quick story about that. Not a story. Let me actually ask you a question. You all would be a great group to answer this. I'm sure you're all savvy shoppers. If you were to go to the store and buy a single apple and buy a single Twinkie, which one do you think would be cheaper? I see one person saying Twinkie. Who agrees with Twinkie? Anyone?
I think Twinkie.
Everyone says Twinkie. Let's unpack. You're right, by the way, but let's unpack this for a second. Twinkie has probably 1 million ingredients in it, half of which I can't pronounce. Don't know what they are. They're made in a lab somewhere. A Twinkie has a lot of packaging, right? It's got the plastic on the inside. It's got the box on the outside. A Twinkie is shipped in from, I believe, last I checked, the place that manufactures Twinkies is not even in the United States of America, so it's shipped internationally. And somehow it's cheaper than an apple, which, as I said before, Wayne County is the 3rd biggest apple producing county in the nation. So let's think about it. Ingredients, none, right? Unless you count rain and sun. Packaging, none. There's no packaging on an apple, or maybe a bag, I guess. And then freight, it's from Wayne County. So how could a Twinkie be cheaper than an apple? That's my question. Does anyone have a guess? Because I can tell you why, but I'd like to know what anyone else thinks.
Big food conglomerates.
Yeah, big food conglomerates, but it's not even just. It's not even just greed. Greed is, I'm sure, part of it, but unpack it further. At the end of the day, how are they making money off of it being cheaper? Because if it was just greed, they would be charging more for it. The answer is federal subsidies. We as a nation, our federal government, and by the way, I told you before, I'm an elected official in the city of Rochester. I'm a liberal. I'm a Democrat. I'm all those things. This is not a left or a right issue. No federal government has gotten this right. Left, right, blue, red. Our federal farm bill every single 5 years subsidizes corn, wheat, and soy, and it does not subsidize what we would call agriculture, but actually the feds call specialty crops. Agriculture to them is the big commodities. So at the end of the day, the stuff that makes a Twinkie, the stuff that makes all the stuff that is so cheap and so abundant is corn. It's all corn, right? High fructose corn syrup is the first ingredient in everything. And ultimately, the saddest thing is that we actually have the ability as a nation to rethink some of these things, but our own federal policies makes it so that those things tend to be a lot cheaper. So I say all that from your question or your comment before, because even though the quality of the product from places like the federal government are improving, we still have a major problem, which is that places like food banks tend to be we are the depository for the end of the food system. And when there's an overabundance, when there's an overproduction of things like potato chips, when there's an overabundance of things like crackers and cookies, they end up in our facility. And that's a major problem. That's a problem bigger than Foodlink, but a problem we really need to address. Any other questions, things I can offer some clarity on? Stacy, was there anything that you wanted me to talk about that I didn't get around to? I'm happy to.
I'm going to say you talked about things I never even thought about. I think you touched on so much that was so different, and just a different idea about, well, food banking, which I never really thought about. And I have to tell you, I work for one of those agencies that gets their food from Foodlink. I work for Trillium. And we are a food cupboard. So
yeah, Trillium does a wonderful job. Yeah.
Right.
Jen,
in a zip code, which is interesting to me. And this is something actually I have to say I found very interesting, because I live near Highland Hospital. I'm a city resident. And I remember being at School 12. It was a program we're doing on my neighborhood board. And I had no idea there was provided breakfast and lunch out of School 12. Now I look at School 12 because it's in my neighborhood, where we are one of the more affluent neighborhoods in the city, and never thinking that this is a problem where there are people who do need breakfast and lunch coming into that school. And the same with our food cupboard at Trillium covers zip codes 14607, 14620. And you kind of look at that, and I'm usually thinking of, what about 14609, looking at different places in the city. So I think I've learned a lot tonight.
Yeah, I mean,
from what you were saying.
And we can unpack some of that stuff a little bit further too. One of the major problems, I think one of the major problems with the Rochester City School District, among others, is that there really are no neighborhood schools. So kids are bused everywhere. There's no connection. There's no guaranteed connection between neighborhood and school. So yeah, School 12 itself, you may not think that it has a huge amount of need nearby, but the kids who go to School 12, undoubtedly, there's no kid in the Rochester City School District there's no school in the Rochester City School District who does not need free breakfast and free lunch. Interestingly, in a lot of schools, in all the suburban schools, people have to actually income qualify to get free breakfast and free lunch. That is not true in the Rochester City School District. Even if Donald Trump's kid went to the Rochester City School District, he would be eligible for free breakfast and lunch, because the poverty rates in our city schools are so high. They just say everyone is categorically eligible. So, we have a need, in my opinion, to really make sure that we are trying to improve the quality of food. Someone just asked the question if home economics are going to come back. I don't know. I doubt it, I guess, because I think that the education system has probably bigger fish to fry. But here's what I really do hope. I really, really hope that we can find a way as a society collectively to really think through how to value eating together, how to value breaking bread together. I talked about how I was going to try to link some of the stuff to Judaism, and I didn't do a great job of that, other than my one little biblical anecdote there. But I will tell you that, to me, looking back on things, and I have a 2-year-old kid now. My wife and I had our first 2 weeks into the pandemic, so he's almost 2. Shabbat is just such an important thing from a cultural food perspective too. The way that we value food. A lot of people talk about the slow food movement, right? And the slow food movement has a lot of different elements to it. But one thing is it's the opposite of fast food, right? It's how do you actually enjoy your meal? How do you think about what's in front of you? How do you think through, how do you appreciate what it means to be able to break bread together? And I think that the the Sabbath tradition is such an important part of that. And that's really something that we are missing as a culture, as a society, in a world where fast food is so predominant. I don't know that we'll get home economics back, but I really do hope that we think through how to bring the ethos of Shabbat back. And I can't imagine what it means right now to be a kid eating lunch at school. I think COVID has done so many damaging things to our society. But I read all the time in the newspapers about how schools were trying to keep distancing during lunchtime, or having kids eat outdoors, or having kids eat, in their classrooms separated. I mean, again, it's not just home ec. It's not just teaching kids how to cook. It's also about valuing food. It's about thinking through what all of it means together. And that's something that we really, I think, can build. And that's not just teachers. It's not just a curriculum. It's a larger kind of cultural moment. And I think each and every one of us can play our part in that. And I'm sure all of you did with any of you who had kids. I'm sure all of you did in your own ways. And I think now, as I start to consider what it would mean to celebrate Shabbat with my child every Friday night, I think now about how much work it was for my father probably to get home early on a Friday when Shabbat was starting early, and to be able to get chicken soup ready and to get challahs made and all that stuff. But it's so vital. It's such an important part of our culture, and I think we really need to value that. Yeah, I see a hand up.
One of the things, if you could talk about a little bit, and I don't know a lot about it, I do know that agencies that you distribute food to have to meet certain standards and are inspected for cleanliness and their facilities. Could you talk a little bit about that and the training? I know when I started at the food cupboard, I did a training through Foodlink that was very helpful. But maintaining the standards, it's one thing to give the food, it's another thing to make sure that people safely receive it.
That's right. So to become a member of Foodlink, there's really only 3 things that one needs to do. First, you have to be a nonprofit organization. We don't serve individuals. So if Karen called me up and said, I want to start distributing food for Foodlink, I would say, what's your organization? Because it can't just be Karen out of the goodness of her heart. That's 1. 2, every one of our members has to pass a basic food safety training. And if you're a soup kitchen who's actually preparing food, there's a more rigorous training that we make people pass. And 3, we make everyone go through a civil rights training as well, which may sound like an interesting terminology. It's actually from the federal government, but in part, the goal is to make sure that everyone is being served equitably. Sadly, the faith-based community, I think there has often been times where the faith community will say, we want to serve you. Come pray with us and we'll serve you food. And that is something that we do not support or condone whatsoever. There's also faith-based groups who have, for example, not wanting to serve the LGBTQ community. That's something that we obviously would not support. So we make every one of our sites go through a training and then sign off that says that they are going to serve anyone who comes into their facility. And then on an annual basis, we send someone to each of our pantries to make sure that folks are doing what they said they were going to do. And for the most part, it's good. But there are some organizations everywhere in this country who I think everybody recognizes that food brings people to the table, right? Let's be honest. We have I'm not great at math, but probably 15 people in this Zoom room. If this was in person and there was food, if this was in person and there was cholent, we would have had 40 people. That's just the way food brings people together. That's how it works. And so there's a lot of organizations, I think, who try to take advantage of that. And I don't even mean that in a negative way. We want food. We're going to work with Foodlink. And then they may have other things they're working on. But we have to make sure that people are doing this work in a dignified manner. It does not matter who you are. No one deserves to be served unclean, unsafe food, and no one deserves to be forced to do anything they didn't want to do. Any last questions as my time ends here? I will tell you here, I'm going to put my I'm going to put my email address in the chat. Email is the best way to reach me. There it is, mgruber@foodlinkny.org. And anyone can go to our website, foodlinkny.org, and learn anything more about what we do. And I'll leave you with a few minutes so that, Stacy, you can try to run the video again. You still have people for a few minutes.
I
And
can
Mitch,
try. I was
this is-
having
I'm sorry.
connectivity problems, I could see. That's what.
Someone else had a question?
This has been recorded, so it will be available for people who weren't able to be here tonight because some people had conflicts. It will be available on the Temple Sinai website.
Okay. Wonderful.
Thank
Thank you all.
Thank you so much for really giving a greater view of what Foodlink is and how it serves this community, because I certainly had a very narrow idea of what is done. So I really appreciate your talk to us. Thank you. And I'm sorry I lost connection earlier on. I went
No
to the
worries.
basement and finally I got you back.
No worries. Thank you all for having me. Have a good rest of your week, okay? Take care.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank
My
you so
pleasure.
much.